the last few years in the AFC, there has been three teams that have been clearly the three best teams in the AFC. The Kansas City Chiefs, we've seen them win 2 Super Bowls. The Cincinnati Bengals have emerged the last 2 years to get to a Super Bowl and then also lose in an AFC title game. And then ever since the Buffalo Bills got Sean McDermott as their head coach, we have seen the Buffalo Bills be a consistent playoff team and a consistent playoff contender. Now, entering this season, people believed in Kansas City. People still believed in Cincinnati. But the one team out of those three that took a hit and people started to question if their window was coming to a close were the Buffalo Bills. And the Buffalo Bills got off to a horrible start to the season, going up against the Jets, who had Aaron Rodgers for 4 plays. You had the Achilles injury to Aaron Rodgers. This was all pre-Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, which we saw all that in the broadcast last night. But in week 1, after week 1 of the NFL season, people were saying, wow, what happened to the Bills last year in the playoffs where they got their brains just beat in and absolutely destroyed by the Cincinnati Bengals on their home turf is starting to carry over into the following season. And you saw Josh Allen was just absolutely putrid up against the Jets in that first game of the season. But since then, you looked at Buffalo and they had a blowout victory up against the Las Vegas Raiders. Then they beat the crap out of the Washington Commanders. But you look at those two teams, and I like the Commanders better than most people. The Raiders, sorry, Sue, your organization's just a dysfunctional mess, and they don't know the difference between their elbow and their you-know-what. But yesterday was a moment for the Buffalo Bills, not to get everyone back in, not to have everyone believe in the Buffalo Bills again, but to make a statement that the Buffalo Bills are not as bad or haven't lost their way as what some people made it out to be after week 1. Because you know this, each and every Monday in football season, we go to what is the flavor of the week. And through the first 3 weeks of the season, I'll raise my hand and I'll admit it, I even said before the season, I predicted the Miami Dolphins to win the AFC East. They could still win the AFC East. But really, the last week or so, everyone was all in on the Miami Dolphins. Maybe the best team in the NFL. They're the best team in the AFC. And Miami went up to Buffalo yesterday. And at first, we thought this was going to be a back-and-forth game. I even tweeted Maggie during the game when she said, fasten your seatbelts, this could be a long day. And I said, get ready to have like 8 or 9 football heart attacks in the game. Because that's what I really thought this was going to be, a high-octane offensive performance on both sides of the football field with both teams. And it ended up being the farthest thing from that, because that was a Buffalo blowout yesterday. And that was a statement delivered by the Buffalo Bills. Guys like Zach Gelb, people could get all in on the Jets, whoever the team were, it wasn't the Patriots, that people were picking heading into the AFC East to win the AFC East before the season started. You still have to go through Buffalo. And this is still Buffalo's division to lose. And they didn't just beat the Dolphins yesterday. They embarrassed the Miami Dolphins yesterday. And the biggest thing the last 3 weeks that I've seen from the Buffalo Bills is they're not asking Josh Allen. I know he's had back-to-back weeks with rushing touchdowns, but to run the ball an insane amount of time. And that's what was being asked of Josh Allen last year and even week 1. We need to live and die and put all the food on the plate of our quarterback in Josh Allen. And I said this to Brandon Beane before, the general manager of the Buffalo Bills. I've said it for months. Until the Bills commit to running the football with people other than Josh Allen, then they're not going to be able to reach their potential. And you saw it more the last 2 weeks, not really yesterday because you didn't need it. But another big part of this, too, is you look at the offseason, and the offseason was so ugly and it was so messy for the Buffalo Bills. And you got to remember that whole Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen, Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott fight that happened right at the start of mandatory minicamps. But not only were the Bills sending a message yesterday, it was also important when you look at the 3 biggest people in that organization that they were all on the same page yesterday. Sean McDermott's defense did a phenomenal job. Josh Allen played to a level that is an MVP type of a level in this league. And probably the most important, Stephon Diggs, who was not happy before the start of this season. And the Bills could tell you, oh, it was nothing to see, not much to see here. They made that an absolute mess, and they tried to scoop up all the toothpaste back into the tube. And if you ever had to do that, it's an absolute disaster, and I just chucked the toothpaste in the garbage. But the Buffalo Bills yesterday saw Stephon Diggs dominate. And we all know when he is mentally focused and when he's healthy, Stephon Diggs looks like a top 5 receiver in this league. And you saw that yesterday with him not only dominating, but scoring 3 touchdowns, and the Buffalo Bills just sending a message to Miami that you are not there right now in order to take us down and show early on in the season that you're clearly the best team in the AFC and the best team in the AFC East. And I'll take it a step further. I was so impressed with the performance yesterday by Buffalo. You could start to make the case again for the Buffalo Bills that they are the best team in the AFC. I'm not ready to say whoever is in the number 1 spot in the AFC is right now better than Philadelphia, is right now better than the San Francisco 49ers. To me, those are the 2 best teams in football, in the 49ers and the Eagles. But we're all trying to figure out who the best team is in the AFC. And you look at the Bengals, that would have been a great pick before the start of the season. But the Cincinnati Bengals, through the first 4 weeks of the season, they've been lost. They have no identity on offense. And it's so perplexing because when you look at the Cincinnati Bengals, they have a dominant quarterback on paper. You have a dominant wide receiver in Jamar Chase, and not just one. Another guy in T. Higgins who could be a number 1 wide receiver on a lot of other teams in the NFL. And you had a defense that the last 2 years under Lou Anarumo has done a phenomenal and a sensational job. But the Cincinnati Bengals, these next 2 weeks, their season is really on life support. They have to find a way to get this to 3-3. Because if you drop one of these next 2 games, you're really screwed. And it's clear that Joe Burrow is not 100% healthy. We know he re-aggravated the calf injury that he suffered in the offseason about a month before the start of the season. But the crazy part is just the lack of chemistry for the first time that we're really seeing it between Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, who have been attached to the hip and have been synonymous with one another ever since their historically great run at LSU and what they've done their first 2 years in the NFL. But this Bengals team, like you look at Buffalo, week 1, they had an awful offensive performance and they bounced back. For the Bengals to really have 3 out of their first 4 games all be awful offensively, it's not something that you just say, oh, well, they started 0-2 and then they started 0-2 last year and still found a way to get to the AFC Championship. We're past that point where you have to win the next 2 weeks. And if you don't win the next 2 weeks, then we start to have conversations about the Cincinnati Bengals missing the playoffs. And you're trying to figure out who that best team is in the AFC. I can't say right now that it's Kansas City. Now, don't get me wrong. I think the Chiefs are going to be right there, and you're never going to want to face Kansas City in the postseason because of who their quarterback is. But here's what's scary, and scary in a good way if you're a Chiefs fan. The Kansas City Chiefs on offense haven't looked like themselves yet. They haven't. And their defense, I know they weren't great yesterday, but through the first 3 weeks of the season, their defense, without Chris Jones for one of the games, did a really good job. So if you need to get your offense fixed, that's almost like a good problem to have if you're Kansas City, knowing that you have 15, you have 87, and a great offensive mind in Andy Reid. But it's kind of crazy that after 4 weeks of the season, and how last week, if I asked this question on CBS Sports Radio and said, who's the best team in the AFC, no one would say Buffalo. After what I saw yesterday, and the way that I've seen the Buffalo Bills, I don't want to say salvage because that's an extreme overreaction after week 1, but rewrite that ship into sailing in the best and the right direction. The Bills right now are the best team in the AFC, and that makes the Buffalo Bills the 3rd best team in the NFL behind the Philadelphia Eagles and behind the 49ers. And I know the Tre'Davious White injury is an unfortunate injury. They've dealt with him, unfortunately, being hurt before. But let's also remember for Buffalo, they don't even have Von Miller back yet. And Von Miller was brought in there to deliver the Bills a championship like he did in Denver and like he did in LA with the Rams. So the Bills in week 1 were horrible. They were lethargic. They were anemic. We all know that. But since then, they have shown that what they put on display in week 1 is not that team. And I get it. I'm not expecting everyone today to be all in on the Buffalo Bills. They still have to get the job done in the postseason. But you look at this AFC that we thought was going to be so great before the start of the season, no one has consistently taken control and command of this conference through the first 4 weeks. Like the Dolphins, they were about to do that. They had a big point to prove yesterday up against Buffalo. If they would have just lost by a touchdown, all right, you lose by a touchdown, you're right there with the Buffalo Bills. But they got blown out. The Ravens, I'm skeptical on them because it's tough for me to buy into that team with how many injuries that they have. The Jaguars, they didn't even put up a touchdown against the Kansas City Chiefs in week 1. So you're starting to see that the AFC looks like it's going to be, for now, a race of 3 teams. And those 3 teams are the Bills, the Chiefs, and the Dolphins. And this is going to be fun to see who's going to the Super Bowl in Las Vegas. Because all offseason long, all we talked about here on CBS Sports Radio was how much more loaded the AFC is compared to the NFC. After the first 4 weeks of the season, we've seen a lot of flaws with these teams. Like the Chargers have an idiotic coach in Brandon Staley. He's lucky to win the last 2 weeks. We'll get to them. Now, the Chiefs we know are going to be really damn good. You look at the NFC or the AFC South, I don't think there's a Super Bowl contender there. And the AFC North, the Bengals have fallen flat on their face. The Steelers, their offense is an absolute mess. The Browns can't be trusted week in and week out. And they have a great defense, but now they don't have Nick Chubb. It's like you go around and you look at it. Aaron Rodgers now out for the year with the Jets. The AFC is not as great as we thought it was 4 weeks ago. And it's shaping out to be a 3-team race right now. And we'll see who else emerges and who else you have confidence in with the Buffalo Bills, the Kansas City Chiefs, and then also the Miami Dolphins. And I'll say this. Maybe Buffalo got embarrassed last year when everyone was on the bandwagon, and now jumping off the bandwagon was the best thing for the Bills, because I don't want to say there was complacency, but the Bills knew how good they were. And sometimes you have to stumble. Sometimes you have to fall before you reach that apex and you become that great elite Super Bowl winning team. And Buffalo, for the first time in a while, can use that motivation card and could use the doubter card. And through 4 weeks of the season right now, I have to call them the best team in the AFC.